We also have to deal with disease versus optimization.
I absolutely fell in love because the level of parasympathetic activation you get from all of those biohacks combined and stacked is just something you don't necessarily achieve on your own, especially in a world where we're writing sympathetic all the freaking time.
The challenge is how do we take specific individualized data to see if it has influence on these particular variables, programs, scripts, and so forth. And now I'm incredibly optimistic. I think we are on the verge of something huge.
How am I going to optimize my supplementation, my diet, my lifestyle in order to support those ebbs and flows of my hormones?
Right.
And there was an interesting study up. And we're back, and we have a lot to discuss because we didn't get to the end of it last week.
We're working our way down an excellent list that Klaudia developed, and by the time I get done running my mouth, it takes too long to record it, so we have to go an extra episode.
That's okay. Having too much content is good.
Yeah.
Imagine if we were sitting here like, I don't know what to talk about. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. So, okay, let's go.
So we have gone through 4 of the trends that I noticed at the biohacking conference, and we're going to lead into number 5, which was how AI is becoming your health co-pilot. Some people are using it as a coach to develop dietary programs, to develop fitness protocols, to develop a lot of different metrics for them to lead their life in a more optimized way. But as much as we know about AI can be very helpful, I think our input makes it or breaks it in terms of what the output's going to be.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm ready to use the term break it.
Okay.
But I am ready to use the term it can make it. That I think part of the challenge is this, Klaudia, is that, listen, in strength and conditioning, there are 1,000 different programs. And you know which one's best? 1,000 of them. The one that you do. It's not even because they all work. Okay, they all work. And so know that. So I think as a consumer who's trying to figure their way into this, know that there's not a perfect. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good on this kind of stuff. This is what's really important. Now, with that said, I've been spending some time looking at using some of these large language models or machine learning and listen, I've loved messing with data for years, and I believe the data is the key. I think this is a huge determinant. Right before we came on and started recording, I was exploring how do I connect my Aura data to a large language model for doing analysis or doing something like that. And I don't have this worked out yet, but my point is this, is that if you really want to make it, and I believe this is the thing to watch as it comes in the future, is when we can really get the integration and when we can really start to see cause and effect based on some of these large data sets. And we have the ability to generate our own large data sets that, listen, 20 years ago, the data we would get was, what did I weigh that day? I might have had a bioelectrical impedance scale that I could get body comp from. I could probably do blood pressure at home. I could do resting heart rate. I could do exercise heart rate. I could put in things like what's the results of a particular lift, whether I'm strong or not, but less than a dozen data points a day. Well, now with some of the wearable data, we're now up into several thousand data points a day. And there's a great book out there called The Signal and the Noise. And so the question is, what is noise and what is signal? And I know in my past, I was working with a big data guy at Ohio State back when I was working with the wrestling team. And I brought him a fairly large data set. It was hundreds of thousands of data points. And he went ahead and ran it in what's called a spider graph. And he came back and he showed it to me. He was very proud of it. And he says, this guy right here, this is who we need to model. And I said, Ralph, the only problem is that's the worst guy on the team and we're cutting him tomorrow. And you could see him like, oh. Well, his mind immediately kicked in. He says, we have to invert our data. So he does this. I come back the next day and boom, here's my Olympic gold medalist at the top. And here's my national champion right behind him. And literally, so expert systems also need people that are familiar with the data to advise them. And over the years, I'll tell you, I've sat with one of my old business partners. We were writing computer code for this system we developed called Via Performance Systems, and we had been asked to take over the code set for another company out there. It was called SciFit. Literally, so he knew what the code meant. I did not. What I recognized was variables. I said that's measuring a variable that we want there, this line here. So he and I would sit there and go through just thousands and thousands of lines of code looking for the key points. And we were able to hack and really take over that data and really take over that operating system and make it work.
How long did
So
it take to distill all that data?
hours and hours and days and days. But my point is this: the system is not expert. The system is just a system grabbing information. Just like, if you're scrolling Instagram, you can see 1,000 different people talking about 1,000 different programs. Well, that's what ChatGPT sees too. It's and again, it's an amalgamation of what's out there. The challenge is how do we take specific individualized data to see if it has influence on these particular variables, programs, scripts, and so forth. Now, I'm incredibly optimistic. Okay, I think we are on the verge of something huge. I just did a webinar a couple weeks ago with my friends from Heads Up Health, and we were talking about the general public taking ownership of health. The old model is you go through life, when you have a symptom, when you have a problem, then you go see a doctor, and the doctor owns the illness. Here's your pill, here's your therapy, here's your whatever. We now live in a time, and I think wearable technology is a big part of this, that we're able to collect a lot of high quality that we can now then start to layer in with lifestyle and things like that and really make a difference. So I am very optimistic on this. I think we are still very early stage, very, very early stage. And, I'm waiting for the big boys to jump in. I'm waiting for Apple, when they, they've got the biggest data sets. I mean, with the freaking Apple Watch, they have incredible data sets. And there's a lot of people that wear that device that have no clue as to what could be collected and what can be done. So again, when we look at the trend, Health Copilot, I believe it's coming. I don't believe it's here yet. Okay. We also have to deal with disease versus optimization. That if you have a symptom, if you have AFib pop up on your device, well, that's a disease, okay? And that needs to be handled by a medical professional. If you have a low HRV from getting your ass kicked in a workout for the last couple days, that's not a disease. That's simply a metabolic response. And you can work with an exercise professional that understands it in order to monitor. Do I need a medical license or not? So that's an important part that's going to come into this. And obviously, I don't know how a large language model makes a medical recommendation. I think we're a little bit off on that, because at the end of the day, the medical profession, I mean, the large language model does not have insurance, does not have malpractice insurance, does not have, if they make the wrong decision, what if it's wrong? And
And it could be. I
it
mean, AI,
absolutely could be.
ChatGPT constantly hallucinates. I've asked it
Yes.
questions, and when I write a lot of different articles in the realm of health optimization, and I look for certain research topics and certain literature in that subject, or in any specific subject, sometimes it gives me the right summary, and then I'm like, give me the link to it, and it's a completely different thing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wait a second.
Yeah, that's what, first of all, ChatGPT is probably my fourth AI tool I go to.
Mm-hmm.
I use at least two other research tools that are designed around research, and I found them to be much more effective. Their links are spot on. Their references are really good. So if you get into the right place, it can be very good. So yeah, and just like,
Yeah.
okay, this is going to sound rough, but just like you have to, take your internet influencer, your Instagram influencer with a grain of salt, you need to go back and confirm. You need to work with someone that knows this and can confirm it too, just to make sure you're on the right track.
Yes, and you got to fact check back into AI too. Like, explain it this little more. That doesn't add up. Like, you can have a full on argument, discussion with AI, as some people I've talked to do sometimes, to really get to the bottom of whatever it brought up and whatever research tool or research source it's referenced. And also, as you mentioned, how you and your colleague had deciphered that data for days on end. What's beautiful about this AI technology, they all of that untangling can happen within seconds, minutes. It
That's
can make life so much more efficient. And I think
that's
that's why
what's
a lot of
impressive.
people
Yes.
are bringing this data, whatever data they get from, you can upload your blood work, you can upload different types of results into the AI you're using, especially if you have created something where it really knows who you are. And you bring in all of the data sets that represent your physical health, mental health, emotional health. And then
Genetics.
the more granular you are, the more accurate output it's going to give you in terms of whatever you're looking to develop. And it's not something that I would follow to the T, but it's good for perspective. It might give you something you didn't think of. It might give you a little bit outside of the box idea that you might want to entertain or take to your physical
Your doctor.
doctor. Yes,
Yeah.
physician. That's what I meant to say.
Yeah.
Take to your physician and entertain. And maybe this is something we can consider. So it brings in a lot of options, I think, that lot more than what we used to have.
I absolutely agree, and I'll give you an example of this. We have appointments with our doctor next week, so we're driving down to Columbus. Longtime friend of mine, good functional medicine doctor, great hormone guy, Dr. Eric Serrano, and I have a list. I have an Apple Notes file just for Dr. Serrano. And I'll hear something and I'll think and so I'll go down through there and we'll click down through these lists. Listen, I know me pretty well. I help my wife try and know her pretty well. And we'll pull this information out. But at the end of the day, we go sit down with the professional, the person with a license. And just because they have the license doesn't mean they're great. I have a really good guy, and we go down through the list. We may be talking about things that he'd never considered that day, but make sense because we're owning our health. Okay, it's important to have him on board, but I don't depend on him for all of the Genesis information. It's a collaboration, and like I said, whenever we go sit down, I've usually got a laptop on my lap, and I'm walking down through a whole series of questions, and then we go into the conversation. Well, what about this, and how about this, and where does this fit? And again, I've been working with this guy for now, I don't know, almost 15 years.
And I think that's, sorry to cut you off, but I think that's very important because he knows you for going back 15 years, which is the key here, that he knows you so well that the more doc knows you, the more precise and personalized feedback, information, guidance it can give you, as opposed to going to your physician every 6 months for 20 minutes.
And working off a lab that was drawn the last time you were there, or
Yes.
or 3 months or 6 months, which is just ridiculous.
Yes.
It's just,
Yes.
I mean, listen, if it's a decision between not going to the doctor and never getting a lab, anything's better than nothing, right? I tend to like to be a little bit more contextual and a little bit more up to date and a little bit more recent in what we're doing. And it's interesting to watch the data that we look at switch. It's interesting to watch us switch from an illness model. Okay, what's your risk of being ill versus what are we doing to optimize your existence?
Yes.
And that's the kind of stuff we spend a lot of time talking about.
That's awesome. And that's a perfect pivot to our next trend that I noticed with early detection, how a lot of people are starting to take ownership of their health. And by not only trying to do the right things on a daily basis, but actually taking a step toward technologies that provide early detection and show you a risk. I mean, a lot of these aren't going to give you like, this is going to happen 10 years down the road, but it could give them lower risk, higher risk. Maybe you should change your environment and your lifestyle in a way to lower that risk. Because again, a lot of times, even when we talked about genetics in the past, it is not your destination. It is going to be something that you have, but it's the epigenetics that will truly determine whether you are going to be higher or lower risk of developing a certain disease. And these early detection tools full body scans, blood works are gaining a lot of traction in how to optimize
Absolutely.
your life and catch problems or potential problems before it's too late, before symptoms come. I mean, one of the things, I mean, I did a Pernuvo scan a few months ago. That was very interesting. And I know they have a lot of media around the fact that they could catch early cancer, they could catch early tumors, which is interesting. Only found a few different aging things in my body that was not of concern, but of intention and interest. And also, the one thing that I also saw at the conference was this blood work that looks at specific biomarkers that detect your level of risk toward, I can't remember how many, but dozens of cancers. And it's interesting because the past couple of months, I had talked to a few different longevity clinic owners and doctors about this, and they all say people come to this test with a lot of anxiety. And funnily, I was hanging out at that booth with one of my friends, one of our common friends, Natalie Nidham, and she took the test. And I asked her, like, how do you feel about it? And it brings up a level of, I'm a little anxious. Like, what if it's going to come back positive? Like, how am I going to change things? Like, there is that uncertainty. And do I want to know this, or do I want to have the ignorance bliss kind of bucket instead? And you and I work in this environment where most people want to know, like, if something is higher risk for me to happen, I want to know about it so I can, again, take ownership and actually take the steps to lower that risk and potentially have that never happen. So these early detection tests, I think, are becoming more common, and hopefully as we go, more affordable.
Well, and I think what you're talking about too is when we talk about the anxiety that comes with wearable tech. It's a sense of control.
Yes.
And this is what, people ultimately want, that sense of control. They want and they want a sense of safety. And this may be challenging that. This may be challenging that. I have a strong growth mindset. Bring your technology. Tell me what you think you want to know. Bring it on. I want to know, because it helps me inform my larger model of myself and what I'm doing. And can you hear my dog talking? Jackson.
He's got an opinion about all of this.
Um so you have this happen, Claudia, starting in almost probably 1978, 79. I started the process of owning my own physiology. As an athlete, I started to get better. As an athlete, I wanted to do better. I wanted to know more. And I wasn't satisfied with what the rest of the team was doing. I needed to know what was right for me. And that started me on a journey, how many, 45 years ago. And that journey has continued all through college. I was constantly looking at my own information, my own data, doing my own program. And ultimately, this is where I have my sense of control. I have my sense of safety. Yes, there's a chance something could happen in my genetics and I pop a cell and we start to develop some type of a cancer. I could also step in front of a bus when I'm crossing the street. Okay, so that's a risk too. And when I go ride my bike, I put a helmet on. I haven't fallen off my bike and I don't know how long. No, I take that back. I've fallen off my bike one time and hit my head and broke my helmet. This was probably 30 years ago. Hit my head hard. Had to call, I'm sitting on the side of the road thinking, okay, you're kind of messed up here. So I called my wife, and I think literally it's the only time I've ever, broken my bike in a manner that's happened. There's always risk. That's out there. That's part of the game.
It's part of life.
But the process is that if you keep lining up enough of the positive behaviors and you keep your eye on the indicators, you can see this ahead of time. I think the early testing is amazing. Okay. I don't think it's refined yet. I think a lot of it, I think a pretty high percentage of it is a great business model for somebody more than it's a great health model for most of us. But I do see the emergence of some really cool technologies. I was looking at a facility earlier today. I'm kind of itching to get hyperbaric.
Oh,
I, th-
yes.
um, I think and hyperbaric is slowly becoming much more affordable. The units are shrinking. They're becoming more standard. There's more around, and I think there's huge benefits that come from that. But so same with my sauna, same with my red light, same with my exercise. We've put together a series of modalities in our life that support this movement. So I love technology like DEXA scans. Knowing your body composition and tracking that is really good. Is a is a $5,000 CAT scan as valuable as a series of $50 DEXA scans? One happens once, one happens 10 times, which could be over a period of close to 4 years. I think that's a great investment, seeing where your lean mass is going, where your fat mass is going. I think that's great stuff. But I do love the application of this new technology, proteomics, metabolomics. These are and again, AI is driving that. I mean, they are able to do analysis there that we just didn't have the analytical horsepower to do before. And so it's going to be interesting to see what pops out of it. I am optimistic. And I was working with a company the other day. They have a technology where they can send a blood test to your house. You prick your finger, you collect the blood, you put it in a box, and you mail it away. How cool is that?
Yep.
And it goes and again we can and again I this now doesn't sit in my doctor's file. This sits in my file.
In yours.
I'm able to aggregate this together and again be able to make a bigger picture. So I think AI and early detection is
They do
excellent.
they do go hand in hand. And also, not only these AI models can create and speed up the process of analytics, but can create the result page and the interpretation of the data in a way that my mom can understand.
Right.
Which often where was the disconnect in terms of healthcare and taking ownership. Like, I don't understand what all this data means. Like ranges, too high,
Yeah,
too
yeah,
low,
yeah,
like
yeah.
good. So these AI interpretations and graphics can now become so easy to interpret and easy to understand for the layperson that they actually feel like, I understand this. I know what steps I need to take
One of
after
one
this
of
step.
the one of the screening skill sets for getting into med school is not communications. Okay, so there's a lot of really smart docs out there that can have just a ton going on between their ears, but their ability to communicate it to the patient, particularly under the demands, the pressure of patient after patient and what's going on with there's just a ton of pressure on them. So this is where those models become they become really nice tools. And I think if I were a physician, I would be embracing this because I think you get to a situation, there's that 80-20 rule that controls on everything. 20% of your patients will take 80% of your work, 80% of your patients will get by with just these simple tools. And you know what? I'm okay talking to Eric every 6 months to a year, mainly because I have my data, okay? I don't need to get into his file to do it. I have it. So I'm very optimistic about the next decade and with health and performance and longevity.
Especially, that gets me excited because our next trend is focused on women,
Mm-hmm.
because women's health, from what I can see, is becoming a lot more prominent in overall healthcare.
Yes.
A lot of products, a lot of brands, a lot of physicians, and a lot of thought leaders in the industry are starting to focus on women and look at certain protocols from a lens of, this is for women, so it has to be different than how men would do it. And I just love how this is becoming something where women are now looking at a intervention or a protocol on a personal level to, like, how to supplement, and they're not doing the same exact thing that a male physician said on YouTube, but they actually take into consideration that, okay, if I'm a cycling woman, I have 4 phases. Things happen with my hormones within those 4 phases. Now, how am I going to optimize my supplementation, my diet, my lifestyle in order to support those ebbs and flows of my hormones? And there was an interesting study. I was talking to Kayla Barnes at the conference, and she Actually, she got me onto this study, and I'm like, okay, I need to look into this. Rapamycin, we know, is a pharmaceutical drug that is often prescribed for patients that go through transplants in order for the transplant to stay within them. Now, it also has been part of the longevity conversation. Like rapamycin is this longevity drug that it really helps you, increases the lifespan of mice, etc. So a lot of these tech longevity gurus were taking
Yep.
rapamycin at a
Going
microdose
crazy.
level.
Yep.
Have you
Yep.
tried it?
No,
You
I'm
haven't.
no.
I haven't either.
I recognize the data on rapamycin, and for our listeners, the way rapamycin is an antibiotic, and the reason it's called rapamycin, it came from the Easter Islands, which were natively called Ratatouille. They found it there, they cultured it. Again, they've used it primarily in transplant, but it also inhibits at a cellular level a protein called mTOR. And in fact, we discovered this protein that the mTOR stands for the mechanistic target of rapamycin. And this is where we really started to understand, this thing called autophagy and autophagy's role in longevity. One thing leads to another. To answer your question, no, I have not. I
Because
am,
I've heard mixed results,
I'm
to be
very
honest.
pragmatic. I am very slow to adopt
Yeah,
things like
I haven't.
this. And, and I think, and like I said, I think we're starting to figure it out. I promise I'll give you the floor back. But one of the things I want to say is I believe this has been a benefit of social media, and that is raising the importance or our understanding of the fact that women are not small men. And for many times, this is the way research was handled. And listen, I get researchers, wanting to do research on men, not women, because it controls variables, and you guys just bring a boatload more variables to the table than guys do. We're relatively simple animals. But it has raised the importance of this, the role. And I'll tell you, there's some great doctors out there. I'll tell you who's killing it. Amy Killen.
Yes,
She's out in Salt Lake City. She is killing it. So if you're a female and you want to follow someone who really has their act together on female health, hormones, and so forth, Amy's killing it. And I'm trying to think of Molly Maloof does a
she's
great
great.
job. There's a group, the gal at Stanford, the exercise physiologist. I'll think it. We'll put the notes in
Yes,
anyway. There's a lot of great female docs out there who are painting a different picture for you so that you can ask different questions. Doesn't mean you have to go to a female doc. Go to a good doc, but just ask different questions.
yes. There's one more who I wanted to carry, Dr. Carrie Jones.
Hmm.
She's an excellent person when it comes to hormones, especially if you're in that perimenopause, menopausal phase. She does a lot of education on social media, and the way she comes across is just absolutely educational, entertaining, and engaging. So I highly recommend her too. So anyway, so the study with
Stacy
rapamycin,
Sims.
Stacey
Stacy
Sims,
Sims.
yes,
Sorry about that,
yes,
everybody. I had to
yes,
run a
Stacey
quick
Sims.
Google.
Yeah, she actually got me onto having that 30 grams of protein in the morning before I get to do anything, because I used to do a lot of fasting in the morning, and now I either put some. I usually just do the collagen coffee to get my day started. Anyways, tangent. Back to women's health, new research. So this is an emerging research. So there's no definitive results yet. There's some early results that have shown that women who supplemented with 5 milligrams of rapamycin a week for 3 months showed slowed ovarian aging. And as we've seen that a lot of the things that occur to women in terms of those later stages is because our ovaries age very rapidly once we hit our mid 30s, 40s,
Mm-hmm.
and later on. And there are links correlated with ovarian aging and additional diseases showing up in our lives, whether it's cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's, cancer, etc. Now, what's interesting is that it was a pilot study, so I believe they had like 30 something women participating. And on average, each month, a woman sheds about, or the ovaries release about 50 eggs a month. Of those 50, one gets
If you're lucky,
called what?
fertilized.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. And with this rapamycin protocol, the ovaries only shed 15.
Mm.
So they pretty much showed a 20% decrease in organ aging because of the fact that the ovaries release less egg, meaning there's slower aging of that organ.
Is that extending reproductive age?
But I think that's the idea, to extend reproductive age. But then again, there are questions, are there any side effects in terms of how fertile those eggs really are going to be? Because if you take too much rapamycin, ovulation could completely go away and menstruation could go away, which is not good for fertility. So they seem to argue that they found that sweet spot with that 5 milligrams a week. And just for a comparison, patients who go through transplant surgery, they tend to get about 13 milligrams a day for years. And the reason why they looked at this particular path in women was because you could see the change fairly quickly. With longevity studies with rapamycin, you would have to track people for years on end, decades on end, to see if it works. But with ovaries, they could see changes within 6 months. So they only took the rapamycin once a week for 3 months, and then they retested, I believe, regularly throughout that period. So it's just interesting to see. And they're going into phase 2 with 1,000 women they want 1,000 women to enroll. And again, we don't know rapamycin's effect on the follicles, whether there could be any type of genetic issue with those eggs that get released. So,
And what happens when you extend I mean,
yeah.
no offense, who wants to have a baby when they're 60?
I think it's because a lot of times now we're seeing women going into their late 30s, guilty, going into, I want to have a family one day, but I'm already turning 36 this year. So we're feeling that clock ticking, and it's that mid-30s when we start to see a decline in fertility, and just the maturity of the eggs are just not as healthy as they used to be.
Sure.
And a lot of women are freezing their eggs if they're in their mid-30s in order to have the opportunity to have children down the road. So it's
But let's not miss the impact. I'm going to go back to my model. The environment is pushing us towards poor
it
health. The
is.
environment that we live in, we don't move enough, we eat shitty food, we have bad sleep, we get shitty light, and we don't have a direction. Okay, so it starts there. Get a purpose. Okay, when you get a purpose, fix your movement, fix your diet, fix your sleep, fix your light. Okay, do all those things, but will rapamycin make up for bad movement, bad diet, bad sleep, and bad light? Probably not.
No.
Okay,
No.
probably not. So at some point in time, we've got to take a step back and say, this is, they talk about a pill for exercise. No, I don't think so. We've evolved a certain way. You've got to move. You got to do these things. You don't need a high rocks kind of a workout. Okay. I follow a guy online, Alan, I'll think about his last name here in a minute. He's suggesting that high level cyclists and triathletes add walking into their daily routines. Okay. These are people that spend 6, 7, 8 hours a day on a bike. And now he's coming back and saying, well, you should walk a little bit too. And what we're talking about is not necessarily adding more work, but adding work at that very low level. This is what's so important. And there's huge value that comes there. So it's interesting for me. I go back to, what are the 4 rocks in the jar? The jar is purpose. Having purpose is critical. Having something to wake up and marshal the energy to push against the environment. Marshal the energy to say, I need to move more today. I need to make sure I've got nutrient-dense foods available. And if I don't have enough nutrient-dense food, I'm going to get supplements to help me get across the line. I'm going to defend my sleep like with a vengeance. Okay? No, you can. And again, we were talking about the conference and you guys were at the Steve Aoki thing, and no, homeboy here would have been in bed. I'm not willing to trade my sleep for a rave. But now listen, I'm also 63 years old. I've been married for 35 years. I'm not in that mate acquisition mode. I get it. Thank God I'm not in it. So I'm able to move on.
Yeah. Also, I just looked at my notes and I totally misspoke. So with the women lose 50 eggs each, not lose, but yeah, women lose 50 eggs each month. One of them goes through ovulation.
I see.
So
Okay.
that's the right word. That's what I
Okay.
misspoke. Yeah. So they lose 50 and
One
then
of them
one goes to
actually busts
ovulation.
out and heads down that fallopian tube looking for a boyfriend.
Yes. Yes. And I've seen so many women, honestly, well, it could be just because I'm in that age and a lot of the people who I follow, a lot of my friends are in that age that are having children or wanting to have children. It's crazy how so many are going through these fertility issues whom I've seen being healthy women. What is going on?
Yeah,
But I totally agree with you that you mentioned that, yes, if you're leading a shitty lifestyle and you're going to just think that you're going to pop rapamycin and it's going to change your life, that is not going to happen. Like you have to
I don't
start
think
the
so.
ground up.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Okay. Up next is a topic that we've talked about in the past. We dedicated a whole conversation and a whole episode to it. And I see continuing rise of this modality, which is saunas. Whether it's infrared or dry saunas, they are hot and they are here to stay from
No,
what I'm
no, no
seeing.
pun intended.
No pun intended.
Yeah, pun
And
intended.
there are small ones, there are big ones, there are things that you just kind of sit in, your head's out, and you're just sweating in there. So there are a lot of different shapes and sizes, which is cool. But on the other hand, what I've also seen, and I think it goes back to our conversation about cold plunges coming out with it's good for you, for your brain chemistry and all of that, but the data isn't as strong as it is with saunas. And for that reason, I see them cooling off. I'm
Nice.
throwing
Very
all
nice.
kinds of words.
Very nice. There you go. That's why you're a pro. Yes, I think we were a little ahead of the curve back when we talked about this. Is that they're really it's really hard to overdose on sauna. Now you can do it. Don't get me wrong. You can do it, but more is better. It's pretty much hotter is better than colder, and longer is better than shorter. So yeah, there's huge benefit, and you can go every day. You can go multiple times a day, and there's benefit. Like I said, the dose response is good. Cold has got to be strategic and targeted.
Yes.
I believe, and we talked about this before. There's benefits that come from it, mainly neurochemical effects. The dopamine, the things that are happening in your brain are wonderful. But if you do it too much, you're going to suppress signaling, and if you're suppressing signaling, you're not doing work for nothing. And I think
Yeah.
that's important.
Yes. And a lot of women are seeing that there are certain times of their cycle that they should or shouldn't cold plunge. So there's a lot more. And I love that you mentioned targeted because that's how I see cold plunging is becoming more precise and
Yeah.
people aren't just jumping in and out because it's fun.
You
Because
know,
if you
you have a sauna. I have a
Mhm.
sauna. Okay. Neither of us have a cold plunge. I don't think you
Yeah.
do you?
No.
Now, I'm still trying to figure out how to do a cold plunge in our lifestyle, but I don't. It's a cost benefit. Is it worth the cost? Is the benefit there for the cost of integrating it?
Yeah,
Right now, I'm kind of no.
I agree.
Now, I'll tell you, there's not a better cold plunge than when you're up in the high mountains and you get to go jump in a mountain stream and it just takes your breath away. Yeah, that is the best. But right now we're down in the lowlands and I'm just not ready to make that investment.
Yeah, when you go back to Lake Tahoe, then
That is my
it'll be
happy
great.
place.
Yes. Okay, moving on. Red light therapy is another tool that has been growing and growing. And I quite frankly haven't seen a slowdown in its growth. It's becoming much more of a staple for skincare, for gut health, for muscle recovery, for just overall mitochondrial health and cellular energy because there's loads of literature that
Yeah,
is just showing its efficacy with like no risk. Obviously, there's too much of a good thing, yes, but
we're not sure about that. I'm not sure.
tell me
I'm not
more.
sure there's an upper dose on that. I've spent some time talking to these folks. There's definitely a point of diminishing returns, no doubt about
Yes.
that. But I'm not sure there's a toxicity
Yeah,
like with ultraviolet. Like if you go lay in a sunbed too long and it's ultraviolet, the downside is you burn your skin and then you're risking cancer at that point. I'm not sure near infrared has that risk load. It's always buyer beware, but that's a lot lower than it is with ultraviolet.
that is true. And I'm seeing a lot of gyms, a lot of clinics, friends who have invested in these technologies to be in their home, whether it's a panel like you have or a targeted device like I have.
Mm-hmm.
And there are so many use cases. And one of the really cool things that I'm seeing in the higher price tag thresholds, these, I don't know what to call, I wouldn't call it a device, but these beds that literally integrate multiple modalities, including red light, near infrared light, and vibroacoustics and PEMF. And
Yeah.
I'm like, I absolutely fell in love because obviously I don't have the means to have one at my house, but the level of parasympathetic activation you get from all of those biohacks combined and stacked is just something you don't necessarily achieve on your own, especially in a world where we're writing in sympathetic all the freaking time. So that is one of the things that I really love about red light. It allows you to drop in to be a little bit more in that rest and digest state. And whether you use it on your face, on your whole body, or certain parts, I think it's an investment that is worth it. And now they're coming out with red light for pets, which
Yeah.
is really cool.
Yeah, that's
I
funny.
absolutely love it. They had these little things that Pat the dog were laying on. Because I remember I have given red light to friends who've had a pet and the pet had some type of surgery. And I just like, put this on your pet. This will really help.
And they think you're nuts.
At first, yeah, but then once the pet's starting to, feel better and the scar heals faster, and all of a sudden they're not itching it, like, there must be something about
There's
this.
there's no doubt red light's here to stay. It's a very
Yeah.
valuable
How do you use it? I'm curious.
so I will so first of all, I think the mistake, and I don't know if people do this or not. I know I see it at shows. People will be doing red light therapy in their clothes.
Yeah.
Doesn't work. Okay, you got to be naked. Okay, so and the funny thing is that when I first got this red light panel, we had it in our bedroom in our home at the time. And my wife, so I did it, and it gets it's very bright red. And but my wife was doing it, and I happened to walk out on the front porch, and our bedroom window, it looked like there was a nuclear reaction going on in our bedroom. It was hilarious.
Yeah.
And I took a picture of it. My wife said, "Well, that's the last time I'm doing that." So we had a bathroom in that home with no windows, and that's where it got moved to. Here in my office, there's no windows in my office, so we can close the door and do it, and the light doesn't. It's not creating an event, but you gotta be naked. So the way
Yes.
I do it is this is about 4 square feet of red light, and I do that front for 10 minutes, back for 10 minutes. If I that's kind of my routine. If I have an injury or if I have something I'm trying to rehab back, I may do another session like on a shoulder or on a knee, but I also have red light. Our friends at Therasage, I have one of their flexible pads. I love that thing. So if there's a knee that's bothering you, if your low back's bothering you, and the Therasage, you can plug it into a battery pack. I mean, you don't even have to plug this into the wall. I travel with it. It's in my biohacking pack that when I travel, I put that red light in there. When my knee was really bad, I have a compression garment. I have what do they call it? Balancer compression suit.
Oh, no way. That
Yeah.
is so cool. The those compression boots.
Yes. The pants
Yeah.
that comes
Yeah.
clear up to your torso.
That's
So
awesome.
I would, if I had to travel and I had 2 flights, if I had a connection, by the time I got there, my knee was just screaming. It was just screaming. And so I got to where when I would travel for a show, I would pack that in my carry on, pretty heavy, but I'd pack it because when I got there, literally it turned my day around. And I started putting that flexible red light down inside the compression pants. So I was doing red light and compression at the same time. Now there's other, our friend Kimmel, Freddie Kimmel.
Oh, yeah.
He works with a group Espresso.
Flow
They
presso.
Flow Presso. That's it. Espresso is what I drink. Flow Presso, and that's pretty cool. So they're using a red light compression combined therapy that frankly is pretty significant.
Yeah, we underestimate how much our lymphatics play a role in how good or bad we feel. And we should do an episode on lymphatic drainage and
Not a
lymphatic
bad
system.
idea.
That would be cool.
Why is it
Okay.
important? Okay,
Yeah. All right. Oh, we've reached our last trend,
that's
which
okay.
is community. And I
This is
think,
what's so cool.
yeah. I'm seeing a lot of people draw to doing things in groups as opposed to when biohacking first started, it was like, oh, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm optimizing everything in my own time by myself. What's now it's grown into is that I'm going to retreats, I'm going to gyms with friends, I'm working out with friends, I'm going to these biohacking, health optimization, longevity clinics with all the good stuff with friends because we're starting to understand the value of community and how much without it there is no long life.
And I don't know if you recognize this, but I see the retreats as being a very female focused trend.
Yes.
Listen, I see a lot of places where gals are getting together to do the biohacking. Our friend Dasha Maximov has a thing down in the Dominican Republic. She does a great job with that. No boys allowed. Okay, which I get. Okay, you want a place where you can feel at peace, where you're not worrying about what you look like, what you do, that you're just. And I think that's awesome. Now, I don't think the men have figured this out. Men, we tend to be more cavemen, but
I see exactly that because and it could be just how I think about it, but I think women get vulnerable easier, a little faster. Like we shed those
and you
baggages.
should, and you
Yes.
should,
And we
because
should, yeah.
yeah, because we traumatize really well in our society, and we traumatize women very effectively with the behaviors and the things that we do. So God
Yes.
love you for protecting yourself.
And when we shed in a community, the community builds us back up. And that's where all of that strength comes from.
Yep.
And I'm seeing, these men's groups, these smaller groups in different parts of the world and the country where men come together to give space and hold space for vulnerability and masculine vulnerability and allow that growth and unfolding to happen for the masculine to still feel safe to share and shed and then really
Well,
build back up.
and develop a masculinity that's not toxic masculinity.
Yes.
Develop a masculinity that basically helps society. And listen, we can do that all day. I think there's so many things that we do, whether it's in sport or in business, that frankly they're toxic. What is toxic? Meaning that doing that takes away from someone else, takes away from you, or takes away from someone else versus building the group. So listen, I'm all about that. I don't play well with others. My third grade teacher said that. And I tend to like to do things on my own. I tend to like to train on my own. I don't like training in groups at all.
Yeah, I remember you mentioned that.
But I love getting together. I love scientific conferences. I love getting together for conferences. I love conversation. I love these things. But so much of this stuff, I kind of like just being on my own.
Yeah, but I think you also understand the value of community, and these scientific conferences is where you truly feel like you are part of community. And I was listening to this one interview actually last night and this morning. I'm a fan of Simon Sinek and his
Mm-hmm.
philosophy around certain things. And he's working on a book about friendship, which I can't
Good.
wait
That'll
to
be
read.
great.
And he said he defined community as a group of people who want to grow.
Love that.
And I absolutely love that.
Love that. And don't get me wrong, I've been a part of, listen, I wrestled for 13 years. Okay. That was a very male dominated group situation.
Yeah.
And if you don't pay attention, it can become toxic fast. Okay. But I've been part of that. This part of my life, I tend to like to be by myself on my own.
Oh, well, you're
But
never on your own. You have somebody who loves you dearly. Laura is there, so you're never on your own.
there's that.
You
Well,
have a
there's that.
support system, which is key.
But I'll tell you what was funny about not going to Asbury this year. I'm part of that community. The reason I know I'm part of that community was the amount of feedback that I was getting from people that when they figured out I wasn't there, they reached out to say something, which was really cool. I mean, I'm not minimizing that at all. It's really cool. Listen, I think it's good to take a breather every once in a while. You don't need to be at all of them.
Yes.
But it's whether it's my old wrestling buddies when we get together for our alumni matches or when we get together for NCAA's, or whether it's I'm going back to my 45th high school 45-year high school reunion, and it's kind of interesting. There's a couple people I want to see. there's most I don't give a shit about, but there's a few people I do want to see, but there is a desire. There's this thing. I'm like, I listen, I think I've gone to one class reunion or maybe two. Um, after your first 10 years, they start coming every 5 and so forth.
Yeah.
But this 45 coming up right now is kind of interesting, but that's a group I'm interested in getting back to.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I love the feeling when you start to belong to a community and somebody who has traveled far away from the community that I grew up in, having traveled from Hungary to the US and then from the US, from Florida to over to the UK for a few years and then back to Florida and then LA and now in Arizona. My communities have changed many times and it wasn't always easy to feel like I belonged to a community because it wasn't, I mean, in college, yes, I had my group of friends, but once I was out of college, it was always difficult. And with the biohacking conference and with the biohacking community, I finally found the community where no matter where I'm in the world, I still feel like
Mm,
I belong. And these are the people who I can be curious together. And we're all thriving to grow in so many assets and facets of our lives that I can bring the weird question to them and be like, hey, so I've been thinking.
yeah, yeah, and you're accepted. Well, that's what's so cool.
Yeah,
Well, listen, that's the beauty. It's why we do what we do. It's why we have the podcast. And if you are kind enough to give us your time and listen to us go back and forth, we want to help you too. So if you have questions, if you want to be part of our community, we really want you to be part of that. We're flexible. Do we need to do a webinar? Do we need to do a group call? If there's something that you want to do that you'd like to blow up what we're doing, let us know because that's what we're here to serve you. That's what our objective is, the journalist and the scientist. And as we move through, we're excited to hear back from our listeners.
that is true. And next week, we have an absolutely exciting guest whom we would love your questions for because we have our own questions, but we're going to put this out on social media too to gather some more questions and see what you guys are all interested in. But it's going to be Dr. Alessio Fasano, who is a Mass Gen doctor, researcher, author. I mean, you've read his book. I've talked to him. If you've heard of gluten freedom, there's so much
He
that
is
he can.
the guy. He is the researcher when it comes to understanding gut health, celiac, wheat allergies, and if you haven't, if you struggle with intestinal problems,
Yes.
listen, if you go to a doctor, they're going to start to suppress your immune system. They're going to start to do that, or that you might have Crohn's disease. They're going to cut part of your gut out. And this may be as simple as stop eating gluten, stop drinking beer. We've seen this really move the needle for some people. And so Dr. Fasano his book is outstanding.
Yes, we are very excited. So stay tuned.
Until next
Thank
week,
you. We'll see you
everybody,
soon.
thanks for listening. Thanks for giving
Thanks
us
for
your
listening.
time and ask
Subscribe.
questions.
Yep. Bring us questions. See you soon.
See ya.